All right. So as we are moving through this semester, just make sure that you guys are aware that pretty much any feedback, except if you want to comment on my clothing choices, is greatly appreciated because this is my second semester really teaching online. This is my first time teaching a class of this size online. So any little comments of stuff that might help you out, just make sure to get in touch with me. But with that said, we'll go ahead and get started. It's 9 o'clock. I want to make sure that we get this done on time. I know it's Friday. Thanks everybody for joining. Today we're going to start moving into looking at some of the drugs that are associated with this class in general. And this is going to be a little bit of a primer. And I understand we have some upperclassmen, even some graduate students in this class overall. So for some of you guys, this is going to be a bit of a review. But we also have some juniors and some underclassmen and some students from different departments who are interested in this class. So I want to make sure we cover some of the basics before we move on to, some of the intricate pathways overall. If you're following along at home, let's see if I can have my Kindle app here. This is the drug. We are looking at chapter 1 right here. So this directly works with chapter 1. So if you've gotten the book so far, I would encourage after lecture, do the reading. I'm a big proponent of doing the reading after lecture because I remember being back in undergraduate, reading the chapter, having no idea what it meant, just struggling to get it done. And then going to lecture and being like, oh. So I think it's better to get that refresher after you actually understand and can have a little conversation with it. So read the chapter after lecture. All right, let's move back. So today we'll talk about supplements first, then a little bit about drug classification system, and then get into just two really big umbrella types of drugs, being agonists and antagonists. So first, we'll talk about some supplements. And this is a great article that I posted online from Steve Newmaster. And I just pulled out one of their big figures, kind of the big take-home point from the article overall. And what this does was they went out and they looked at, I believe it was over 100 different supplements. And what they wanted to see is they ran them through something called mass spectroscopy, which is able to identify all the different supplements or substances that are in a supplement. So if you take a supplement, whether it's a powder or it's in a capsule format, there's a little bit of a something in there, or if it's a pill, they can crush it up and then run it through the mass spec. And there's different spikes associated with the compounds that are in that supplement overall. And what they wanted to see is, let's look at the nutrition label that's posted on the bottle. Okay, this bottle says this thing has these 4 substances in it. And what they found is overall, about 50%, we'll use a little red here, just about 50% of the products they had were authentic. So 1 out of every 2 supplements that they tested actually lined up with what they said. Okay, this is supposed to have creatine in it. Guess what? Mass spec says this has creatine in it. However, of the other or all the products in general, there were incorrect product labels on 60% of them. So you might think, okay, well, how does that line up with 50% of them being authentic products? Well, you can have an incorrect product label while still having what is said in there, okay? So there's other things on the product label. But of the other products, they found that about 30% of products had a substitution in them. And what this means, if you look into some of the, the literature out there that's on supplement usage, they put a lot of what they feel to be non-active substances into these products. Can anybody think of an example from the news recently, specifically, not necessarily related to what's it called? Not related to substances or to supplements, but another substance that there was a substitution that was made that had really bad outcomes. It's super popular, especially on college campuses. All the cool kids are doing it. All the middle schoolers are doing it now. Ross?
Is it like the vapes?
Yes, Jade got it right. Vaping. So what was happening with vaping is that, there's no regulation or very, very little regulation of the vape juices or whatever they, put in those things, or the cartridges overall that go into some of those vape pens. So some of the manufacturers who were just selling this stuff over the internet said, you know what? This nicotine juice, that's kind of expensive. You know what's really cheap? Vitamin E oil. Vitamin E is super, super cheap. So let's just throw a bunch of vitamin E in there. It's just a vitamin. It's going to have no problem overall. But Ross, what do we know about vitamin E?
Vitamin E is a lipid soluble vitamin, which means it accumulates in your body, and if you have too much of it, it's bad for you.
Yeah. So it's especially, not only is it really bad if it's in your body, it's really bad if you vaporize it and put it in your lungs, even worse. So a lot of those cases of what was called popcorn lung and some of those respiratory diseases that were happening were due to the fact that here's a supplement, these, vapes that are not, they're not labeled correctly. People are just substituting something they thought was in an inert substance that actually ended up having a bad result down the road. What a lot of supplements do is they take like rice powder or other things that have very, those are pretty safe overall, but they're just cutting whatever's in there with some of this other stuff just so that they can, fill a bottle of, these giant horse pills so that they get the placebo effect of, oh man, if I'm taking a pill this big, there's got to be something good in it for my, biceps. Okay. So 30% of the supplements tested had a substitution in there. Even scarier, about 20% of substances had contaminants in it. Now, this is just something random that a lot of these facilities do not have any sort of oversight for the manufacturing processes that goes into it. So, you know what? Rat falls into the combinator while you're chopping up your supplement. No big deal. We had also, here's fillers. This is more not necessarily our substitution, but this is some of those, those rice powders, those things that don't actually have any effect associated with them. And then they found some that had no sequence at all. That's kind of a lack of finding. But the scary things here are these two right here. So if you're taking a supplement in general, when this study was done, I think 2013, I'm going to talk in a minute about some things you can look for to make sure that this doesn't happen. But overall, back in 2013, you had either a 3 in 10 or 2 in 10 chance of getting something that had a substituted ingredient in it or a contaminant in it. So knowing that, that's a little bit scary. So last year or 2 years ago when I taught this class last, I had a super great question from a student being like, okay, well, some of these things aren't bad for you overall. How would I know if something is going to be bad for me? So we're going to move on. What does the FDA have to say about supplement safety? And generally, let me pull up my notes here. Okay. The biggest thing that you guys should understand is, especially, Hannah, this applies to you with being a student athlete, and I know we got Hunter as well in this class. You have the right as a consumer to ask the company about their product. You can feel free to look on a product, find the phone number, find the company, and basically what you can say is there's a lot of questions that the FDA says, if you are thinking about a supplement and it's really important to you that this doesn't have anything, here are some questions that you have the absolute right to ask. Number one, what evidence do you have that supports these claims? We've all seen, actually, let me grab some of my bottles real quick here. Here's one of the labels from students who made a supplement for our final project a couple of years ago called Appalachian Salt, which turned out to just be meth. That's how they were marketing it. But they said on here that it can help smooth movements, getting pumped, burning fat, feeling focused, and lifting heavy longer. We've all been to GNC and seen something on the shelves in there that says something similar to that hopefully is not meth. Okay. But you as the consumer, when you pick up that bottle and say, oh man, I want to lift more weights, you have the right. What evidence supports the claim? And a lot of the times what I've started to see with some supplements is they'll start putting graphs on their bottles themselves to show the study that helped prove their supplement worked. If you actually dig into the literature on some of those studies, you will see they are less than reputable overall. But that's where you can start with that. Also, you can ask about any results of safety testing. Has this company put any safety testing into place? Have they tested it in any animal models? Have they even looked at any randomized controlled trials with humans? Have they looked at some of the side effects from giving this supplement to people? You have the right to ask about that. Another one that's pretty simple to ask is, do you have quality control? And to me, this sounds like a pretty simple thing. If you're producing something that people are taking, how do we, if you think about, I spent some time up in the lab running these plates that are manufactured to identify different proteins that might be in blood. They have quality control for those to make sure that every batch that goes out is similar. Because one day you can have Maddie making it, and one day you could have Katie making it, and Maddie gets a phone call while she's making it and forgets to put one of the ingredients in. If you don't have quality control, that just gets shipped out. Okay, some of these companies do not have any quality control whatsoever. Okay, and actually, my wife and I have a really good friend who is a PhD chemist who works and makes a ton of money as a QC director for one of the CBD companies down in Boulder. Okay. And the last thing you can ask is, have there been any adverse event reports? So even though supplements are not necessarily tested by the Food and Drug Administration, they still kind of fall under that umbrella for the FDA. So if you as a consumer take a supplement and have an adverse event, you can write into the FDA and say, hey, I was taking Appalachian salt and, I was up for 4 days straight. That's my adverse event. And what they'll do is they will not put that company out of business. They will start a spreadsheet somewhere of, okay, here's all the adverse events. And if that list goes up too high, then they will actually take some action. Now, there are independent companies that verify products. And these are some of the labels or some of the images that you might see on the bottles when you go to the store. This is the one that I've seen more times than not, this USP. But if you see any of these 3 labels on there, you can know that some independent board has looked at that supplement, which is good. So that's a step in the right direction if you see one of these labels on there. But they only look at 3 things. Number 1, they look, is this properly manufactured? So they are the ones that look to see if the facility it's being produced in is actually up to health codes. So that's a good step. That means that you're not getting rats falling into some of the supplements like you would if it didn't have one of those labels on it. So that's good. That's a step in the right direction. Number 2, it contains the listed ingredients. So this says, okay, on my nutrition label, I'm saying that this supplement has creatine in it. One of these governing bodies will look at the supplement and say, oh, yes, it actually has creatine in it. Fantastic. Step 2, check, check. Okay. Number 3, does it contain harmful levels of a contaminant? So does this have, okay, well, this might have a little bit of bleach in it, but is it too much bleach? That's what they're looking at here with some of these supplements. Is this an amount that would actually cause some damage, or is it just like a little sprinkling that has happened in there? And that's what they're looking at overall. Now, Can somebody please chime in here real quick to say what this governing body does not do? Let's see. Allie, would you be able to look real quick to see what this does not do? It's a supplement.
You know, I'm not sure.
Okay. Anybody else? It's properly manufactured. It contains the listed ingredients. Doesn't have harmful levels of a contaminant. Ross?
I don't see anything about the quantity of the listed ingredients. So if you're trying to get, X percentage of whatever supplement, I would imagine that they're not. Yeah,
That's correct. They don't tell you, if this says, okay, every pill is supposed to have, 5 grams of creatine in it. It doesn't necessarily tell you that that's true. Okay. But there's 2 really important points. Okay. Some of these supplements that are being, manufactured here are not necessarily known chemicals. Either they're proprietary new chemicals that are being, manufactured in a lab through chemistry, or they're just somebody going out into their backyard and scooping up whatever plant they can find and grinding it up and putting it in a pill and saying, oh, this totally works for me. So a lot of times it's unknown if the listed ingredient itself is damaging or dangerous. So, but is it dangerous? We don't know. There's no FDA testing. This is like what we were talking about the other day with some of the testing that's going on with the vaccines that are being produced for COVID right now. The reason those take so long is because they have to do a lot of safety testing to make sure there's no adverse events. But with supplement industries, what they find is they don't have to do any of that safety testing overall. Okay. So we don't know necessarily if it's dangerous or not. The way they find out if it's dangerous is they, make their best guess. I'm not saying that companies are putting out supplements that are purposefully dangerous, but they're putting out something that has potentially a mechanism associated with it that can improve your sports performance. And then if they get enough adverse event reports, well then, okay, well maybe that's dangerous now. So it's kind of backwards from what we would expect from a medication. The other thing this doesn't tell you, does it work? We don't know. You can, Hannah can make Hannah's, Miracle Sports Supplement LLC and just put it out there and have it be a bunch of flour and some little gel caps. Sell that for 2 or 3 months until somebody says, you know what, I don't think this is really working. And then they finally get back to her. And by that time, Hannah's made a couple $1,000,000. She closes down shop and, goes and lives in Santa Barbara. Sounds great. But that's one of the dangers with supplements. So I think everybody should be aware of the lack of regulation overall. And also that if you see these 3 symbols, one of those 3 symbols on it, you're going in the right direction. Okay, that tells you a little bit. If you don't see any of those symbols on there, you might want to do a little bit of a head scratch or look for something that is marketed as being similar that might have one of those 3 on there. Okay, so let's move on to how we classify drugs in general. Okay, back to different notes. So 3 ways you can classify a drug. We're moving away from supplements and now into medications a little bit, okay? So we'll start with the generic name. And so an example of a generic name that most of us are probably pretty familiar with is ibuprofen. Or acetaminophen. So the good thing about having these types of generic classifications of drug is internationally across different countries, you say ibuprofen. Ibuprofen means the same thing here as it does in Brazil, okay, or any other country. If you go to any MD, they're going to know what you mean when you say that type of generic name. However, another one is either the proprietary name or the brand name. So if we think about ibuprofen, there's a number of different brand names that are associated with that, the most common one being Advil. You know, you might also see like Motrin or Bayer. These are different ones. The reason we have different brand names associated with ibuprofen is because when a drug is developed, you have a certain duration of time that name and that's the chemical formulation is proprietary, meaning nobody else can make it. But I think it's after about 10 years that chemical formulation has to become public, that the patent that they apply to becomes public, and then other companies can make the same thing and just put a different brand name on it. So that's what happened with Advil overall. And if we think about acetaminophen, we're generally going to see that as Tylenol, which I have become more and more accustomed to because my 10-month-old is teething right now. So I know all about the benefits of Tylenol. And then the last way, which is, you know, the way I like to think about these because I'm a nerd, is the mechanism of action. So if we want to think about these overall, we say, okay, what's the mechanism? We know I go to the gym, I put 10s on either side of the bar, I do some squats, I'm super sore the next day. All right, I'm going to take some Advil after that. How does that reduce my pain? Well, it's a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory. We know that. It's an NSAID. Non-steroidal drug. Okay, so we know it's not a steroid, and we know it produces or it reduces inflammation. But the way that it does that is it's a COX-2 inhibitor. Okay, and COX-2 inhibitors, there's a whole cascade of events that result in inflammation by COX-2 being activated, and therefore, if we break that kind of chain of events at COX-2, we can reduce inflammation overall, and therefore, we can reduce our amount of pain associated with that. And then Tylenol also reduces pain, right? You've taken that when you've had a headache or something like that. You know, my kiddo takes it when her teeth are hurting her head. Okay, and we know that this has two separate mechanisms of action that are really interesting. So number one, it's an analgesic, meaning it reduces some of the pain signals that are coming from areas in pain, the nerve transmissions, and then also it's an antipyretic. Who wants to take a guess what an antipyretic means?
Reduces fever, but we don't know how.
Yeah, it changes the set point, actually. There's a great paper that I'm going to post for anybody who wants to nerd out on this one by Dr. Stitt back in the 1970s that talks about the difference between temperature rise during exercise versus temperature rise during fever. And what happens during fever is your set point for temperature basically changes. At rest right now, all of us have a set point right around, 97.5, 98 degrees, right? That's why they take your temperature when you're going into certain places to see if you have any sort of illness. Well, when you get sick, your set point goes to 99, 100, something like that. The rationale behind that is if your body is hotter, we can kill off some of the things that are causing you to be sick in the first place, okay? So there's a benefit of that. Versus when you go out and exercise, maybe not so much around here, but if you went to like Arizona or something like that and exercise and came back, your body temperature would be higher. But guess what? Your set point is still low. Okay. So it's the difference between that. And what the antipyretic does is it says, oh, my set point's up here. We're going to put it back down here and start some of the processes that result in heat dissipation. Okay. Blood flow to the skin surface, those sorts of things as well. So understanding about mechanism of action is really cool because it tells you a little bit more about how that drug actually works. Once we move on from how to classify drugs, we have to think about the ADME of a drug. Okay. And what this stands for is absorption. Make this a little smaller. Distribution. Metabolism. And elimination. So with any drug, these are the 4 kind of areas within that we are interested in as far as, thinking about how they work overall. Absorption, that's how it gets into the body. Distribution, once it's inside your body, how does it get to its target? Metabolism, okay, it's gotten there. It can't be here forever. I got to figure out how to get rid of it. And then elimination is how does it actually physically get out of your body after we've broken it down? Okay, so let's think about these just a little bit further. We're going to start with absorption. This is the kind of the broadest term overall. We have 4 different ways that we can absorb a substance into our body. Okay, Gretchen, are you here with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Cool. Can you guess one method that we can get a substance from outside of our body inside?
You could absorb something through your skin.
Yes. Number 3, skin. Can you give an example of a medicine that you absorb through your skin?
The first thing that comes to mind would be like a nicotine patch.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Great example right there. A nicotine patch. Okay. So you place this patch on your skin and it will actually absorb through your skin into your bloodstream. Yep. We have 2 examples here. We have our dermal patches. And then we also have topical creams or ointments. I just learned relearned all about these when I took a trip back to my home state of Connecticut and was bit like crazy by mosquitoes because they don't spray there like they do here in Laramie, and then had to put a bunch of anti-itch topical creams on my feet because I got a bunch of mosquito bites. Okay, so that absorbed into my skin, stopped the itching. It was anti-inflammatory and antihistamine, and it worked. Fantastic. Great medicine. All right. Garrett, would you be able to guess another method of absorption?
Taking a pill orally or something like that.
Ingestion. That's number 1 on the list. Most drugs we're going to eat. Okay, that's the easiest way to get them in. Tablets, liquids, and capsules. And the difference between a tablet and a capsule being a tablet is the medication itself just squashed together, whereas a capsule is that medication in powder form, and it's going to have a capsule surrounding it, and that's going to help protect that medication until it gets down into your stomach. Because sometimes there can be some negative effects of actually having that medication in your mouth. Okay, that can, you could absorb it too quickly, and that can have some negative effects associated with it. All right, does anybody else want to guess? We got 2 more to go.
Intravenous.
Injection. And within injection, intravenous is one type of an injection overall. So IV. So for example, you go to the hospital and you have a lot of pain. They're going to place a line into you, and then they will put some morphine directly into your vein to help eliminate some of that pain. But there are also 2 other types of injections. Thoughts about this one? Hannah?
Never mind. I thought I had something, but I don't.
No. Okay. Well,
So-
one is really important to me. It's a way that I keep this really nice looking tight face all the time. It's important for me. No wrinkles in my forehead, right?
Subcutaneous.
What's that?
Subcutaneous.
Subcutaneous.
Subcutaneous or subdermal. That's how I get my Botox. Sub-Q or subdermal. Okay, did anybody watch the Icarus movie and see how what's his name was giving himself the steroid injections? Not IV, not subdermal.
I am.
Yes, intramuscular. And there are reasons for all of these different types of injections, and that gets to the M of the ADME, the metabolism, and also the distribution. Do we want this to be a local injection? That you think of something like a cortisone injection. You don't put cortisone into an IV. No, if you got a sore knee, you inject it into the muscles and the joint capsule around that knee because that's where you want it to be. However, if you have generalized, let's say you have, some of these chronic pain issues that are across your entire body. Well, now I want that to go to the entire person. So that's going to be an IV injection as well. Okay, last one. We live in Wyoming, and this one is very prominent here, this type of absorption method.
Breathing?
Oh, that's short. You're sort of close. You see this, sometimes at the bar.
Is it like inhalers? Like you like inhale it?
You guys are so close, Jade and Hannah. You guys are really, really close. We got one more type of way that you can absorb a drug that we haven't talked about. It's not vaping, but it has to do with nicotine.
For all of these young people, I'll chime in here. It's smoking.
Nope. But you guys are on the right path because you all talked about, breathing, inhaling, those sorts of things. Yeah, that's true. But inhalers are under this umbrella.
You're just looking for like aerosols?
No, that's how you inhale it. You can also have nasal inhalers.
Is it like those nicotine pouches you put in your mouth?
Ta-da!
In your lip?
Yes. What is your lip? You think about that. Okay. What about your nose? What about your eye?
Mucous membranes.
Ah, Gretchen got it. Mucous membrane. Let's see if I can spell. There we go. Eye drops. And suppository, that's a way as well. Your colon actually has a lot of receptors in it and can absorb drugs very quickly. And it was funny when I would, about mucous membranes, one thing that baseball players, so college baseball players are not allowed to dip tobacco on the field during a game. However, college baseball players and probably, softball players maybe as well, it's kind of ingrained in the culture of that sport overall, that's a thing that you do. And so some of these athletes who are addicted to nicotine, instead of saying, you know what, I'll take 4 or 5 hours off here, they found, let's just say, alternate ways to get their nicotine fix during the game, which was undetectable to people watching from the stands. We'll just leave it there. So those are our 4 methods of absorption overall. Let's move on to our distribution. Whoops, not drug types yet. Switching notes.
Dr. Johnson, can I just ask a question?
Of course.
Is there a specific reason why some products are tablets as opposed to capsules and vice versa?
Yep, absolutely. Sometimes it's a marketing thing. For some people, there's a preference out there, and there's also a level of kind of officiality that's associated with a capsule versus a tablet. One reason that one would be the other, you've seen some things that are fast acting, right? A drug that may be fast acting. They would probably choose to put that in either a capsule or a tablet form. Maybe they'll put it in a capsule that dissolves way quicker than the tablet would, because to make a tablet, you have to press those drugs together very, very tightly. And maybe that would take a long time to dissolve. But if I have a caplet, I can put all the little different kind of granules of the medication in there, and that gelatin capsule will dissolve very quickly when it gets to my stomach. And then that medication will disperse and dissolve and distribute through my body very quickly. The other reason that we talked to is maybe you want to protect that medication. And for example, one unsuccessful method that was tried with opioid drugs was they tried to create a protective coating around them so that people could not crush them and then snort them, because that was resulting in a lot of overdoses. I mean, people figured out ways around that eventually, but that was a rationale for why they had it in a certain kind of mode, one versus the other, capsule versus tablet.
Okay, that makes sense.
Usually it has to deal with either distribution or metabolism of the drug.
Okay, cool.
So if we move on, let's go to distribution now. And this is pretty simple. This is just a nice little definition that we have here. It's the method that the drug is transported to the biological target. So we're going to talk about some examples of some blood glucose regulating drugs later when we get into some of our drug types. And this could be how the drug gets from, okay, I took a pill to my pancreas to help with the production of insulin. Okay, that's how it could get there. Basically, this is going to be through the bloodstream. And there's kind of two different ways within the bloodstream. Most is dissolved. Within the plasma, meaning within the water component of blood, right? The only other way that it could be transported is bound to a protein. So you have a number of proteins that are in your blood. Some drugs are designed to bind to those specific proteins and have those kind of work as little carriers to get them to wherever they need to go specifically. Okay, but most, we'll put a little star next to dissolved in plasma. The majority of drugs are going to be distributed throughout your body through being dissolved. Okay. Let me see if I can go down here. I'm going to put a little star. I'll put it, actually, we already used a star. So if we're going to journal format here, we'll do a double dagger for our second symbol. And I'm going to put this up here. Here's our metabolism. Okay, and I'll write it again down here. All right, so this is the biological change that happens to the drug once it is in the body. And then is usually due to an enzyme. And we have 4 different kind of modulations and metabolisms that can affect here, once that drug gets into your body. First, you can have your active drug, and due to a certain enzyme, it will get broken down and get turned into an inactive compound. That's the majority, once again, our ibuprofens, our Tylenols, those sorts of things, going to get broken down so that we can get rid of them. However, there are some other ones that can go in different directions. Inactive to active, okay? So this would be a drug that, on its own, without the presence of an enzyme, it is completely inert. If this was placed in a petri dish without the enzymes that are in your body, nothing would happen, no effects would occur. However, once it gets combined with enzymes that you have in your body overall, it will become activated. And this is something that happens generally with drugs that are very resistant, or not resistant, are very susceptible to being dissolved in your stomach acid. So basically what would happen is you take a drug, well, if it's just left on its own, if we put it into your body in its active form as is, the acidity in your stomach is going to dissolve that, then it will never be able to get to its target overall. However, if we put it in its inactive form that can survive getting through the stomach and then get dissolved into the bloodstream, well, now there's an enzyme within your blood only, not in your stomach, that can then turn this into its active form. Okay, so a lot of thought is going into some of these drugs overall. Then we also have our active 1 to active 2. I always think about side effects when I think about this metabolism here. Okay, well, you take something that you want to have this effect, but after it gets metabolized, guess what? It also has this other effect. Yeah, this antidepressant is great because it will, reduce some of the feelings of depression in people. But once we also activate it, it can also have some pretty bad psychological side effects as well, which is another reason why the FDA is great, because they test all these things to make sure that most things that come to market don't have these secondary activities associated with them. Okay. The last one hopefully gets weeded out there is active to toxic. This is the classic side effect here of something that we think on the surface, oh, this, if we look at the chemical structure of this substance right here, no problem with this overall. But once it gets into your body, there can be a change which can make it dangerous overall. And the last one here, we talked about elimination. And that's just getting rid of the drug. And most of the times, if you want to getting rid of drug, 90% of drug elimination is through urination. Either the drug itself or metabolites or broken down parts of that drug. And Jade, I think you asked this question on Wednesday about why don't we have new methods? Well, even though we have new drugs, we're still getting rid of them in the same way. And urinary detection is the most kind of effective way to continue to do that because of this metabolism and elimination. Okay. So let's finish up here with a little bit of our drug types. The 2 types of drugs that we're going to just briefly touch on today. Number 1 is going to be our agonists. And this is going to be a drug that mimics the action of another molecule. Okay, so we're going to just finish. We're not going to do antagonists today. We're just going to do agonists. We'll pick up with antagonists on Monday. But let's think about a super, kind of general pathway that hopefully, if you took exercise physiology with me or with Dr. Schmidt, you will have gone through. Glucose. We want to get glucose into the cell through our GLUT4 transporter. Right there. Okay. And in order to get that GLUT4 transporter, which we'll do in pink here, to get to the cell surface, we need to release that vesicle. And to get that vesicle to go up there, we have insulin receptor substrate 1, and a whole cascade of events that result in IRS1 moving to our vesicles that contain our GLUT4 transporters, and then those transporters can go from inside the skeletal muscle cell up to the cell surface, allow that glucose in. So in order to get there, we need to have a signal. And we all know that that's insulin. Insulin binds to the insulin receptor on the skeletal muscle cell, stimulates this entire pathway, which I'm drastically simplifying by just saying it's IRS1. That results in our GLUT4 transporter translocating to the cell surface. Now glucose can get in. Okay, you have someone who has diabetes, specifically type 1 diabetes, where they do not produce insulin. Well, what can this person do? Well, fortunate for this person, you have other insulin receptors. So here's another one. And to this insulin receptor right here, we're going to give this person a medication that looks pretty funny, way different than our insulin overall, but it has the same kind of binding site on it. This is going to be something, this is a agonist, AG. There's a drug called catechromin, which is an insulin receptor agonist. Basically, what will happen is, we said before, when this insulin binds right here, it results in the phosphorylation of IRS1. Well, guess what? When cametachromin binds to the insulin receptor, it has the same effect. So an agonist is a drug that is different than the actual innate or endogenous substance that you have, but that binds to the same receptor and has the same effect overall. When we say that this mimics the action of another molecule overall, that's what an agonist is in general. We got 4 minutes here, so I'm going to try and get through this so we can move on to a new section on Monday. Let's go with bright blue, and we're going to just do antagonist. And the picture I had at the very beginning of the lecture was Scar from The Lion King. We know that an antagonist is somebody who blocks something from happening. Okay, everybody wanted Simba to become king, but Scar was trying to make sure that did not happen through all kinds of terrible situations. I won't spoil it for you if you haven't seen it. Make sure you got some Kleenex nearby. Okay, but there are 3 ways that an antagonist can work. Number 1, it can block the receptor site. So here's our receptor right here. Here is something called S961, which is a drug that has a very technical name associated with it. And this drug, S961, is an insulin receptor antagonist. It has a very high affinity for the insulin receptor itself. However, when it binds to that insulin receptor, it does not cause any phosphorylation of IRS1. And therefore, it blocks these. So if insulin came along and tried to bind to that, it's like, no way, man. Seat's taken. Sorry. That's our number 1. Number 2 is it can bind directly to the molecule. So let's say we have our insulin. This is our ant number 1 here. Let's just do this. Our ant number 2 would be a substance. Let's do this in purple. that comes along and binds to the molecule itself. And okay, once our antagonist type number 2 would bind to the insulin itself, it would deactivate that insulin. And now this insulin, because it's bound to this big antagonist, cannot bind to the receptor overall. I looked for a long time to find this type of antagonist for insulin, and I will offer up 5 bonus points to the first person from lecture who can find an antagonist that binds to insulin and deactivates insulin. I looked for like probably a half an hour. If you can find it, 5 bonus points going on to your final grade there. The last type goes to the site of production. And this is stop production or release. So we have our ANT3 that acts directly on our pancreas. The drug we have here is called diazoxide. Diazoxide is a drug that you can take, and this is specifically for people who have very low glucose in their cells in general. We want that glucose to remain higher overall, so we want to stop the production of insulin. And this diazoxide will work on the sodium-potassium pumps within the pancreas and therefore decrease the release of insulin from the pancreas. So now you know the 2 types of drugs in general, agonists, antagonists. We're going to look at a bunch of drugs this semester that fall into both of these categories. And then within antagonists overall, we have ones that block the receptor site, that directly bind to the signaling molecule, and can stop the production or release of that signaling molecule in the first place. All right, we're 9:50, 9:51. I apologize for the extra minute. I will see everybody on Monday. If you did not get a chance to get that video in, I know there were a couple of people. It's the first week. We're going all online. Send me an email. I will reopen that lesson for you. I want you to get the chance to get those 25 points. So please do get in contact with me. If you were not able to meet that deadline, we'll open up quiz number 1 and will be, I believe, next week. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, have a great weekend.
Enjoy your weekend.
Thanks, Hunter.